Did you know that the renowned philosopher Immanuel Kant never traveled more than 10 miles away from his hometown in his entire life? Yet, his ideas traveled the globe, shaping our understanding of ethics and morality. In the late 18th century, a man named Immanuel Kant was making waves in the world of philosophy from his modest home in Königsberg, Prussia. This man, who never ventured far from his birthplace, would go on to become one of the most influential thinkers in human history. Kant was a man of routine, preferring the familiar streets of his hometown to the allure of distant lands. He was known to take daily walks along the same route, a routine so precise that locals could set their clocks by his passing. Yet within the confines of this small radius, Kant developed philosophical ideas that would span continents and centuries. His work in the field of ethics, in particular, has had a profound impact on our understanding of morality. Kant's ethical theory, known as deontological ethics, posits that the morality of an action is determined by its alignment with duty, or rules, rather than its outcome. This was a radical departure from the consequentialist theories prevalent at the time, which held that an action's morality was determined solely by its results. Kant's ideas were not confined to his humble surroundings, but instead reached out to the world, challenging established norms and encouraging people to think critically about their actions and their consequences. His thoughts, like seeds carried on the wind, took root in minds around the world, shaping philosophical discourse and influencing thinkers from a variety of disciplines. This man, who spent his life in a small corner of the world, managed to touch the minds of millions. His ideas continue to shape our understanding of ethics and morality, proving that physical boundaries are no match for the power of thought. In the life of a man who hardly left his hometown, Kant's thoughts on ethics have journeyed far and wide, influencing thinkers and philosophers around the globe. Kant's notion of ethics wasn't about what makes us happy, but rather what makes us worthy of happiness. This sentiment is deeply embedded in his idea of the categorical imperative, a concept that serves as the bedrock of his moral philosophy. The categorical imperative, in its most basic form, is a command that we should follow regardless of our desires or the situation we find ourselves in. It's a rule that applies universally without exception. Kant argued that moral obligations are derived from this command and not from the prospects of any potential outcome or reward. This is where Kant's ethical theory diverges from many others. He believed that morality wasn't about the consequences of our actions, but about having the right intentions. It is the motive, the why of our actions that matters, not the what or the how. Imagine you're helping an elderly person cross the street. Is it because you genuinely want to assist, or because you want others to see you as kind and helpful? According to Kant, if your intention is the latter, then your action, no matter how beneficial, isn't truly moral. Kant's categorical imperative also provides a measure for judging our actions. He proposed that we should act only according to that maxim whereby we can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. In simpler terms, if everyone were to follow your course of action, would it still be a reasonable and justifiable thing to do? If the answer is no, then that action is not moral. Kant's ethics is a demanding one. It calls for us to act out of duty and respect for the moral law, not for personal gain or to avoid punishment. It challenges us to be honest with ourselves about our intentions and to strive for a higher standard of moral conduct. It's not about the outcome of our actions that matters to Kant, but the intentions behind them. That's what makes us worthy of happiness. Imagine a world where everyone lied. According to Kant, such a world would be impossible to exist. Now, why would he say that? Let's dive into the heart of Kant's ethical philosophy, the universal law. Kant's universal law is a cornerstone of his moral philosophy. It's a simple yet profound principle that holds, act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. In layman's terms, it means that before you act, you should consider what would happen if everyone acted in the same way. Let's unpack this with our earlier example of lying. Imagine if everyone lied all the time. Trust would crumble, communication would break down, and society as we know it would cease to function. It's a paradox. A world of universal lying cannot exist because lying itself requires a world where truth generally prevails. Kant believed that if a lie could not be universally applied, it was morally wrong. In his eyes, morality wasn't about the consequences of actions, but about the principles behind them. If the principle behind an action couldn't be universally applied, then the action itself was morally objectionable. Now, this doesn't mean Kant was devoid of pragmatism. He understood that in certain situations, telling a lie might seem beneficial, but he firmly held that the ends do not justify the means. For Kant, it was the intention behind the action that mattered, not the consequence. So if you're about to tell a white lie to spare someone's feelings, Kant would urge you to pause and consider. What if everyone acted this way? What if dishonesty became the norm? These questions, Kant believed, would lead you to the morally right action. In a nutshell, Kant's universal law is a litmus test for our actions. It urges us to consider the wider implications of our choices, to think before we act, and to strive for moral consistency. For Kant, a lie, no matter how small, is a violation of the moral law. It's the principle behind the action that matters, not the action itself. Kant believed that duty, not desire, should be the guiding force of our actions. This sets the stage for our exploration of Kant's concept of duty, a cornerstone of his ethical framework. Imagine a world where all our actions are driven by desire, by self-interest. A world where the question is not what should I do, but what do I want to do? This, Kant would argue, is a world devoid of true moral value. For Kant, morality isn't about fulfilling desires, but about fulfilling duties. Duty, in Kant's view, is a moral obligation, something we ought to do regardless of our desires or interests. It's a concept tied to his universal law, the idea that moral actions are those we could will to be a universal law. If we act out of duty, we are acting in a way that we could will everyone else to act. Now, it's important to understand that Kant isn't saying that actions driven by desire or self-interest are inherently bad. Instead, he's arguing that they lack moral value. For an action to have moral value, we must do it because we believe it to be our duty, not because it aligns with our desires or serves our self-interest. This might seem a bit counterintuitive. After all, aren't many good deeds performed because they make us feel good or because we want to help others? But here's the thing. For Kant, the motive matters. If we're doing good deeds because they make us feel good, then we're still acting out of self-interest, not duty. And if we're doing them because we want to help others, then we're still acting out of desire, not duty. The concept of duty, then, is about acting out of a sense of moral obligation, not because of what we might gain or how we might feel. It's about doing what's right because it's right, not because it's rewarding or beneficial. So, in the grand tapestry of Kant's ethical framework, duty shines brightly as a guiding star. It illuminates the path of morality, a path not paved with desires or self-interest, but with the steadfast stones of duty. To Kant, it's not about what we want to do, but what we ought to do. That's what gives our actions moral value. For Kant, true freedom is not doing what we want, but doing what we ought to. A bold statement, isn't it? Let's delve into this idea. Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher, was all about autonomy. Autonomy, in Kant's view, is the capacity to make morally binding decisions independent of natural inclinations or external influences. It's the ability to govern oneself according to the moral law, which is universal and necessary. This is where the concept of freedom comes into play. To understand Kant's perspective on freedom, we first need to understand his concept of the moral law. Kant believed that moral law is not dictated by external forces, but rather it's something that we carry within us. It's a law that we give to ourselves, and this, according to Kant, is the essence of freedom. Now you might be thinking, but isn't freedom about doing what I want? Well, not for Kant. He argued that when we act according to our desires, we are not truly free. We are merely slaves to our impulses and inclinations, which are often influenced by external factors. On the contrary, When we act out of duty and obey the moral law, we are exercising our autonomy. We are making a conscious decision to act morally, regardless of our personal desires or external pressures. This is what Kant referred to as autonomous freedom. The idea here is that true freedom is not the absence of constraints, but rather the adherence to the right constraints, the moral law. It's about being able to resist our desires and inclinations when they conflict with our moral duties. So, for Kant, freedom and autonomy are not about fulfilling our wishes, but about making morally right decisions. It's about being the authors of our moral laws and following them, even when they go against our desires. This is a powerful and transformative way of looking at freedom, isn't it? It challenges our conventional understanding of what it means to be free, and invites us to rethink our moral responsibilities. In Kant's eyes, true freedom isn't about fulfilling our desires, but about following our duties. Now that's a thought to ponder upon, isn't it? Kant's ethics have left a profound impact on our understanding of morality and human rights. This might sound like a lofty statement, but when we delve into the influence of Kant's philosophical ideas, it's clear that this is no exaggeration. The ripples of Kant's ethical theories have extended far beyond the confines of philosophical discourse. They've permeated our modern understanding of human rights, shaping the principles that underpin our legal systems and political structures. Kant's assertion that every human being has an inherent dignity and worth, irrespective of their actions or circumstances, has become a cornerstone of human rights law. It undergirds the conviction that all individuals have certain inviolable rights simply by virtue of being human. In politics, Kant's ethics have been instrumental in promoting democratic values. His idea of autonomy as the basis for moral law has influenced political theories advocating for individual freedom and self-governance. The principle that we should treat others as ends in themselves and never merely as means to our own ends has become a guiding light for democratic societies, encouraging respect for individual autonomy and equality. But the influence of Kant's ethics isn't confined to the realms of law and politics. Surprisingly, it has found its way into the field of artificial intelligence. As we develop AI systems that interact with humans and make decisions that could affect human lives, ethical considerations become paramount. Kant's moral philosophy, with its emphasis on principles and duties, provides a robust framework for programming ethical decision-making into AI systems. Even in our personal lives, Kant's ethics continue to resonate. They challenge us to consider the wider implications of our actions, urging us towards moral decisions that respect the dignity and rights of others. They remind us that morality isn't just about following rules, but about recognizing our shared humanity. Even centuries later, Kant's ideas continue to shape our understanding of morality and human rights. They remind us that ethics isn't an abstract concept, but a tangible force that shapes our societies, influences our technologies, and guides our daily interactions. The impact of Kant's ethics is profound, enduring, and undeniably relevant to our modern world. Kant's ethics, though complex, offer a unique perspective on morality that continues to resonate today. As we round off this exploration into Kant's moral philosophy, let's take a moment to reflect on the key points we've covered and their relevance to our modern world. We began by delving into the intriguing universe of Kant's ethics, where morality is not a game of consequences but a matter of adhering to a universal law. We discussed the groundwork of morality, Kant's foundational work that lays out his ethical system. From this, we discovered that Kant believed morality to be based on reason and not on emotion or personal desire. We then moved on to Kant's universal law, a revolutionary idea that suggests an action is only moral if it can be universally applied without contradiction. This was followed by an exploration of the concept of duty, where we learned that Kant sees morality as an obligation, a duty we owe to ourselves and others. Our exploration then took us to the realms of autonomy and freedom. We discussed how, for Kant, true freedom is not about doing what we want, but about having the autonomy to make moral decisions based on reason. Finally, we examined the impact of Kant's ethics on the world. His ideas have shaped moral philosophy, law, and even international relations. And though his theories may seem abstract, they provide practical guidance for navigating the moral complexities of our everyday lives. So, how does Kant's wisdom resonate in today's world? Well, it encourages us to approach moral dilemmas with a sense of duty and to make decisions based on reason, not just personal desires or consequences. It reminds us that our actions should always be guided by a universal law that respects the dignity and worth of all individuals. As we navigate our way through moral dilemmas, Kant's wisdom continues to shed light on our path. If you found this video helpful and informative, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more intriguing philosophical insights.